currently of Namseol University. I'm a professor of cultural tourism. I've been here in Korea about 30 years and been involved in some way with Korean Buddhism for most of that time. I've been a scholar of Korea's traditional culture, of many different aspects of traditional spirituality in all different fields, and written a bunch of books and articles. I have a website that you'll see at the end of this that puts out most of what I have discovered here. So today we're just going to talk about one certain Buddhist monk of Korean history, but a very important one in my estimation. Master Jinjang Yilsa, as we call him, with a unique title, Yilsa. His posthumous title name is Jinjang, and that's the only way that we know him by. Yes, in Korean and in Chinese and such, this means, these characters meaning benevolent concealment. It's a term from the Buddhist sutras that got repurposed into his name. Benevolence concealed inside of oneself. And Vinaya, teacher, which is the Yulsa and such, and we're going to explain what that means. And I would say really the most important Korean monk of the early 7th century. He is really number one in terms of significance among this time, although I think generally he has not been recognized enough. He's not, by the current Jogye order and the way that they present Korean Buddhist history, and in other recountings by scholars of Korean Buddhist history, he's not given enough importance, enough status of what he really deserves, in my opinion. And I'm going to show you today why I think he was so important. Of this. In general, the context, by the early 7th century, Buddhism had been in Korea for 200 years, solidly, a little more than 200 years, by the time Jinjang was a young man. But it had been very, very slowly getting into the Shilla kingdom. The other two kingdoms facing towards China had adopted Buddhism earlier and more enthusiastically, although still in a kind of disorganized state, but they had been becoming Buddhist. Shilla was really later, 150 years later than those other two kingdoms, to officially accept Buddhism. And that's pretty strange if you think about it. The three kingdoms on this small peninsula and such, two of them become enthusiastically Buddhist, and that means adopting Chinese culture altogether, adopting the Iron Age Chinese culture of Chinese-style clothing and written language and government style and such, and using the Chinese calendar to tell the dates, things like this. The other two kingdoms adopted this as quickly as they could, but the kingdom of Shilla, which is the southeast part of Korea, hemmed in by the mountains, the drainage of the Nakdong River, Nakdonggang, that Shilla kingdom, they resisted for 150 years, held on to their Bronze Age shamanism culture and refusing to accept Buddhism, at least on an official level, which, that's a long time. That's like 8 generations of human beings. They refused to adopt this more advanced culture that their neighbors adopted. But then they finally did. By 527, the Shilla kingdom adopts Buddhism, and it has about 80 years until Jinjang's time, for about 80 years, so 4 generations of people. Buddhism was in the Shilla kingdom, but primitive still, unorganized, not centralized. Pretty much anybody could just say that they're a monk. If you say that you're a monk, well, you're a monk, I guess. And if you build a building or in your house and you put in something that you say is a Buddha statue, no matter what it looks like, and you can say, well, that's a temple. And I guess it is. There's nobody who can say that it's not. just unorganized. So there was all kinds of different Buddhist belief, and rather unorganized, and a lot of it very incorrect. A lot of things brought in by missionaries, and people would understand or not understand. And this is all very difficult because being translated from the original Indian scriptures of India into Chinese language was a very difficult problem. And then communicating the Chinese written language over to Korea, very few people could really read the Chinese characters, especially in a philosophical kind of text, very advanced sort of writing. Very few people could really understand this in Korea. And so there was a lot of just kind of random practice, let's say, incorrect practice, a lot of mysticism, a lot of mixing of Buddhism with shamanism and just doing magical ceremonies by chanting some scripture you don't even understand, but thinking that just by chanting it you get a magical benefits from this. All kinds of activity like that, and what we might call a real and genuine Buddhism was hard to come by. A few fingers. Now, this guy is really important at the very beginning for solving this problem and getting Korean Buddhism on the correct platform to move, especially in the Shilla Kingdom. Okay. In his early life, he's born 590 CE, and he lived to be about 68 years old total. Now there is at least one professor, one scholar who says this is wrong, and that it's all, his birth and his death are both 15 or 20 years later than this. But this is unproven or whatever, but one professor did write such a paper already that is later. It doesn't matter to us too much, really, the exact dates, but as far as generations and when he was, it's kind of important. But as far as we know, 590. So now, there was another monk before him, a great master, the first great master we know of the Shilla Kingdom, really, Huangyang, Master Huangyang. And here in Korea we have Huangyang University that's named after him, of the Wonbulgyo Buddhist sect. And Master Huangyang, he was the first one from Shilla to go to China and come back and bring some Dharma, bring some teachings, really officially. He could fluently speak in the Korean language, unlike the foreign missionaries coming in. The first one that really established things, that was 599 that he returned. So Jinjang would have been 9 years old. Probably he witnessed the return of Huangyang to the capital city and was probably influenced by this, that he had come from China with the true teachings, correct teachings, even though still on a very lower level. And what Huangyang was teaching was not even really a very pure Buddhism, as we know from the records later. Okay. Now, it was an important aristocratic family. Jinjang was very high level, the sort of people that could be government ministers. Korean society in those days was very fixed. Your birth determined your position in society very exactly, much like the caste system of India that's very famous and such. So he was born to people who could be a high-level government minister. That kind of class, not the kingly class, not to be king, but right under that class. Supposedly his father prayed to Subbosal, the bodhisattva of compassion, prayed to that deity for a birth of a son. He prayed especially to the Subbosal of 1,000 arms, 1,000 eyes, which a particular manifestation which is not shown in this hall, but is popular in many Korean temples. One of the 33 manifestations. He prayed to that manifestation, which is supposed to be the ultimate embodiment of compassion, mercy, and helping human beings. He prayed to that to have a son. Then his mother, that man's wife, she had a dream of a star in the sky falling, a shooting star. The star fell right into her body. Boom. She had that dream. Now that's a very powerful dream, perhaps, for a great man. And then he was born right on Buddha's birthday, Buchanim Oshinal. the best day to be born, I suppose, for a Buddhist and such. Right on Buddha's birthday, the national holiday, still today and such, that's his birthday. Okay. So by 12 years old, already, which is when you become a man in those days, when you would cut your hair, put your hair in a top knot, not cut it, but wrap your hair in a top knot on top of your head and put a cap on and such, you become an adult, a man. By that time already, he was known as a good student. He was studying the Chinese character. He learned to read and write Chinese characters, and he had been studying Buddhist texts and was known as diligent and, a good boy, hardworking and straightforward and such. Had a good reputation. Then his parents died around 620, so okay, he's about 30 years old. Already he was married and had his own children. His parents died. That's considered kind of early when you're 30 to have your parents die. His parents were probably only 15 or 18 years older than him and such, but they died. And after that, he really determined to join the monkhood, to become a monk, to become a serious Buddhist, to give up the world, the worldly concerns, worldly pleasures, and get into Buddhism deeply. His estate, his family land and buildings, he donated it to Buddhism, even though there was no official, really Buddhist setup at that time, but he declared it to be a Buddhist estate then, and his old family home became a temple and became his first temple that he supposedly lived at. His wife and kids were sent back to the wife's parents' house, and he essentially abandoned them. But of course, since they were very high-class people, they were taken care of. It wasn't any a vicious abandonment, but he left his wife and children, did not come back. He went up into the mountains nearby Gyeongju. We don't know exactly where. His family seems to have been from around Ulsan area, south of Gyeongju, so it might have been Gyeongju Namsan that he went to in the south, but we don't know exactly. He built a hut, built himself a meditation hut, and locked himself inside there, just having people deliver food. He would sit in meditation in extreme diligence for a long time, sit meditating. He lined the hut with thorny bushes. He, picking thorn trees, thorn branches, put it all around himself in the hut so that if he got sleepy and started to, go to sleep, he would go against the thorns. It said he sat naked in that hut in all kinds of weather with the thorns around him stopping. He also tied a silken cord around his throat, around his neck, and tied it to a roof beam on the top to hold up his head. Again, so if he started to fall asleep, he'd start choking. He did this extreme measures to stay awake and meditate, to keep himself in meditation. So he got a reputation from people who knew about this in the area. He got a reputation as kind of crazy, but on the other hand, kind of, really devoted to this Buddhism thing. Now, because he had this reputation, and because of his origins, his family class level, and he's already in his 30s, and so he had his reputation. King Jinping, who served for a long time, the longest serving Korean king, and a very powerful king who was in the process of making Shilla to be a very powerful kingdom. Jinping was in charge. He conquered land to the north of Shilla, conquered some of the Goguryeo territory, and also fighting against Baekje. And he was really strengthening the kingdom and trying to promote Buddhism. He kept several times. He invited Jinjang to come to the palace and be a minister, which most people would always, say yes, because that's wealth, that's money, that's power, that's prestige, and really fulfilling your family destiny, such. But Jinjang kept saying no, he's going to practice Buddhism. Can't take any government job. And finally, the king then finally sent him a message threatening him. He said, "I will cut off your head if you don't come here and be my minister. I'm the king. You have to obey. I will have your head cut off." And Jinjang wrote to him like this: "I would rather die keeping the precepts for one more day than live 100 years breaking them." And after that, the king gave up. Instead of executing him, King Jinping said, okay, this guy, he's a monk. Let him be a monk. What the hell? Useless to me anyway. Let him become a bigu. Bigu is a Korean term for become a monk. Supposedly, Jinjang had this a heavenly being. They're not specific about this, but some kind of deity appeared to him in a dream and gave him the Buddhist precepts. Because there was no real master in Korea, nobody who could officially ordain Buddhist monks in an official way approved by the government. There wasn't this system yet. So it's important. He was kind of self-ordained, you might say. Anyway, ordained by a deity in his dream, ordained as a real monk in that way, but just by his own. He didn't go to a master and become his disciple or something. He was kind of self-made on this. It's worth noting, perhaps, if you study Oriental studies, the Chinese have a similar story about Chuangzi. Chuangzi, do you know him? From Chinese Dogyo, Chinese Taoism. The second guy, Lao Tzu, which Koreans call Noja, and Koreans call Changja. Chuangzi in Chinese. He was a great Taoist sage. There's a similar story with him of the emperor of China asking him to come and be a minister, and him saying, no, I would rather enjoy my life, is the way I'd rather enjoy my life practicing the way for even one more day rather than be a government minister for 100 years. And then the emperor left him alone and said, okay, you just do as you wish. You are a philosopher. Chinese have a similar story. It's hard to say which story came first. Probably the Chinese story is older. It might just be a coincidence, but it might be a borrowed story from the Chinese classics. We don't know. Just want to say that as a caution. Okay, now, Jinjang, after becoming, by his own way, officially a monk and spending some more years in meditation and practice there in Shilla, he's dissatisfied because the Buddhist knowledge, the scriptures, the teaching, the monastic practice in Shilla, in all of Korea, is still so primitive that he's not satisfied. He knows this is not the real Buddhism. And so he desires to go to China, which was the big thing. Huangyang had already been to China a generation before him. A few other monks had made the journey from Shilla. Many monks had made the journey from Baekje and Goguryeo, the other Korean kingdoms. So this was the thing to do. If you were really a serious Buddhist, you would go there just the same as today. If you're really, really into technology, high tech, you go to MIT in Boston or Stanford in California. You go over there and you study if you want really the best, the real stuff. Okay, and same thing. You're going to Tang Dynasty China. By this time, China was flourishing. When China was divided for centuries into a dozen different kingdoms and had just reunited at the end of the 500s and just begun to get organized again as a great empire. That was the Sui dynasty. But the Sui dynasty fell apart after 25 years, and there was more civil war and disruption. And finally, China had come back together in 618 to make the Tang Dynasty, and made it the most glorious period of Chinese history, perhaps, when China was so rich and so powerful and so excellent, all from 618 right through the 600s into the early 700s. For about 100 years, China was the most glorious thing on earth. Eclipsed Rome and Byzantium and everything else. So this was the China that he was attracted to go to, of course. So by 636, the Tang Dynasty had already been going for 18 years and was just beginning to, just really flourish as a superpower and as a Buddhist superpower, a very Buddhist empire with all kinds of great Chinese Buddhism schools really getting underway and getting funded, well funded, with great teachers and hundreds of students and big temples. This was all just really taken off in China. And as you can imagine, Jinjang and everybody being very attracted that this is where you gotta go. Tang. Okay, he got the king's permission. He asked the king, Jinping, was near the end of his reign then, and to leave. Shilla 636, he's 46 years old already, so he's quite mature in middle age, and had been a Buddhist for, 35 years already and such, so very mature already. He had already 10 disciples and attendants that went with him, so he was already considered an important person. He got the royal money, I'm sure, the funding to make this trip to China with 10 followers with him, so that's something. And advanced Buddhist education, going for that. But first of all, however, his first big trip was to Taishan. Along the way, it's about from Gyeongju, from Korea here, going to the capital of China, which was Chang'an. Today it's called Xi'an, city in the west part of China. About 2/3 of the way there is Taishan, which is near Beijing. Kind of near Beijing. It's like 7 hours to the west of Beijing, but in Chinese terms, that's close. All right, this is Taishan, shot from the sky, one of the greatest Buddhist mountains of China. This had been established by 200 AD. They started temples here at this mountain, and they started to flourish. So by this time, by the time Jinjang went there, it was already 400 years. This had been a major Buddhist center of China. These are mountains in the far north. These mountains are 3,000 meters high. So they're covered in snow and ice all the time except for the middle of the summer. They're incredibly beautiful mountains, great mountains. They're today a national park of China, and they're still today, there's like 50 temples operating in those mountains. We think historically there's something between 200 or 250 different temples in these mountains historically at the peak. Let's say by the Tang Dynasty time, by the end of the Tang, more than 200. And today there's still 50 temples operating there. I went there like 15 years ago, and it was just fantastic, fabulous experience, great place. It's dedicated, now it's called here Taishan, which means the 5 platforms mountains. These are 5 great, you can't really see this here, but they're 5 great peaks, kind of in a circle, and the huge valley in the middle between them. And in the valley, or lined all around the valley, are all those temples. And the 5 great peaks, each peak has a temple on it and such. And those peaks are envisioned as platforms, which means the lotus flower seat on which a Buddha sits when he's teaching. Right there, the Buddha statue behind you, you see he's sitting on a certain kind of thing there, and it's shaped like a lotus flower upturned, usually in most Buddhist iconography, and upwards lotus flower. The Buddhist, lotus flower is a symbol of Buddhist enlightenment. You know that. And so by sitting on a lotus throne, that's called his platform. And today a Zen master, this bench that's right in front, the wooden bench there is a platform which you can sit in a cross-legged way. And typically a meditation master, a sun master, gives his lectures that way, and other kinds of doctrinal masters can too. This one is more like a desk with a chair behind it and such. But most of these have a large square flat platform on top, and you actually sit there in meditation position and lecture. And most temples are still like that. That's called this platform. These mountains then are called as 5 platforms mountains. These 5 great peaks, and on each one was considered to sit a Buddha, one of the 5 great Buddhas, continually teaching. These mountains are especially dedicated to Subbosal. And we got this term Doryang, a practice site. This often in Korea just means like the courtyard of a temple, the main courtyard where the main hall is and the pagoda. It's the site of practice, the site where you go towards enlightenment. But this term Doryang is also used for particular deities. It's It started meaning the place where Buddha himself, Sakyamuni Buddha, got his enlightenment, the Bodhi tree, under the Bodhi tree at the Mahabodhi temple there in India, at Bodh Gaya city. That place was the original kind of Doryang, the site of enlightenment, the site of practice where you reach enlightenment. So if for each kind of bodhisattva, each kind of Buddha, it's a special place where you do practices, you worship or venerate that deity, that Buddha or bodhisattva, and you meditate and you do the practices and you come towards enlightenment. That kind of place is called a Doryang. So here in China, these mountains are the Doryang of Subbosal, which is the bodhisattva of wisdom. Well known. Subbosal is depicted right over here in this artwork. You can see on the stairway when they turn on the lights again. He's usually paired with Bohyun Bosal, who is the bodhisattva of benevolent action, and he's depicted over here at this stairway. They're usually side-by-side depictions with the Buddha. Those two things, benevolent action and wisdom going together. And then the third necessary component, compassion, the bodhisattva of compassion. Those three go together as the three essential combination that you need together to progress towards enlightenment. Wisdom, compassion, and benevolent action for the world. And so anyway, so he's over here, Munzu, the bodhisattva of wisdom. This is his special place. These mountains, it's essentially believed that Subbosal lives here. The Chinese believe that. This is his home, his residence, as far as any bodhisattva can be considered to have a house. These mountains are it. Now, the Chinese designated 4 great mountains in China as the Doryang of a bodhisattva. The 4 great bodhisattvas: wisdom, compassion, benevolent action, and salvation. Jinjang Bosal in Korea. Those 4 great bodhisattvas, they have 4 great mountains in China: north, south, east, west. And that makes China a holy Buddhist land, having that there. Okay? Now this is the one of the north. It's in the north, so closest to Korea, and it's the one for wisdom. The bodhisattva of wisdom. Okay. So this is, Jinjang gets there. It's already this holy place for 400 years. Examples of it. What I just said. These 4 holy Buddhist mountains are combined together with 5 holy Taoist mountains in China. They have north, south, east, west, center for Taoist mountains, and then altogether then 9 holy mountains, the 9 most holy mountains of China, Kusongzan, you might say. And Korea doesn't really have a system like this, and I'm trying to create such a system like this for Korea. Different thing. But China has always had this system for 1,000 years and such, and they've already designated the whole system, the 9 sacred mountain system, with UNESCO World Heritage Site. So each one of these 9 mountains is already a UNESCO World Heritage Site under that system of 9 holy mountains, and Wu Taishan is one of the best of that. These kind of pagodas and such here containing holy relics, sacred relics of the Buddha, and are especially associated with Subbosal. Every temple here is dedicated to the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and it's the place where you really go to venerate the concept of wisdom and try to become wiser in China. So Jinjang went here. This is his first big stop on his way to the capital city of China. Now, he prayed. There was a statue of Subbosal, which no longer exists, apparently, at this thing, a clay statue of the great Bodhisattva. There at this Wu Taishan, a very famous one. People said that heavenly gods had carved and created this statue. It was so excellent. This is what Jinjang especially wanted to visit. And he went there with his 10 disciples, and Jinjang practiced meditation and prayer, supplication rituals in front of this statue day after day, continuously working until he fell into a trance. He fell into kind of a dream, trance state, and in his dream, he saw that the statue itself was alive. It was really the Bodhisattva, and the statue stroked his forehead, the book says. So it says, stroked his forehead, perhaps giving him wisdom in this way, granting him wisdom, and told him some things, told him a magical mantra for himself that would lead him towards enlightenment, that he said is the most powerful mantra, and told him to make Korea as a holy Buddhist land, and told him, go back to your country, Korea, look for mountains that are similar to these mountains. Look for mountains with the same configuration, 5 great platform peaks, and you will find that I am also there. I am also living there at that place. And gave him, in his after his trance, a mysterious monk figure appeared and gave him relics of the Buddha, Buddha Sarya. Relics of Buddha, including crystal sarya of the Buddha, and also a piece of wood said to be from Buddha's bowl, Buddha's eating bowl, and also a piece of cloth that was from the Buddha's own clothing, his own monastic robe or surplice that he would wear, and also a fragment of bone said to be from the Buddha's skull. Different sources. One source says it's the whole skull, the skull of Buddha, but that doesn't seem likely. But another source says a piece of the skull, one piece of the skull. Different sources say different things, but in total, those things. So here you are. And also he met after Subbosal, after these visions, he goes down to the center of the valley between those mountains. There's a big pond, a famous pond called the Taihu pond, and there was a dragon there. A dragon king rose up out of the pond and told him more things, advised him about building the great 9-story pagoda. We'll get to that later, just a minute. But it told him other things about making Korea a holy Buddhist land. So both from Subbosal and from the dragon king, this brings in some kind of Taoist folk shamanism aspect into the story, both water and mountain energies here going on. But he got these things, 9-story pagoda, similar mountains, given these gifts, these holy relics, 100 pieces of Buddha Sarya, which is the crystal, calcium crystal left over from cremation when they burn the body, and is considered a mark of holiness. And the Buddha, supposedly the Buddha, when he died, he left 3,000 of them, which were then distributed all over India by Emperor Ashoka, and some of those came over to China as holy relics over the Silk Road. And then fragment skull, monastic robe, begging bowl, maybe. These things he was given, according to the story. Now then, he traveled from Taishan, having had this great mystical experience and gotten these fantastic treasures to bring with him. He then went to the capital of China, what is today Xi'an, and had his advanced education for the next 5 years and such. He built his own hut in the mountains outside the city. This shows his asceticism and his frugality. In those days, the big Buddhist temples were in the city, right downtown, nearby the palace. There were big, luxurious, expensive Buddhist temples where monks could live. If the monks were favored by the government, they could live in luxury, silk cushions and silk robes and good food and green tea every day. But Jinjang built his own hut in the mountains so he could study and meditate seriously and not be distracted by all this luxury. He was that kind of a guy to do this, okay? And he studied 3 different schools of Buddhism: consciousness only, the Yogacara school, which is very important in the enlightenment of Huangyang, Master Huangyang Desa. If you were here last time, saw my talk last time talking about him, his enlightenment proceeding at the beginning from this kind of school. It was an important school in those days, kind of faded away now. It's an important bit of Buddhist philosophy, but there isn't much actual Yogacara school operating separately. The Vinaya, the Geyul, or Yul, Vinaya, this means the rules by which monks act. The rules, the regulations for monks. How do you be a monk? What kind of clothing do you wear? How often do you shave your head? What kind of food do you eat? How do you practice meditation? How do you, obeying your superiors and not drinking alcohol and all the possible regulations of behavior of Buddhist monks. And what is a temple? What is a Buddhist temple? What's the definition of it? How do you have a temple? What makes a temple? How do you make a Buddha statue? What is it supposed to look like? How is it arranged? A temple, the arrangement of altars, how do you do ceremonies? All these things are the Vinaya. The Vinaya, how you act as a Buddhist and how you do everything, the regulations of what is Buddhism and what is not Buddhism. Then, if you do something differently, well, this is not Buddhism. All right, those regulations, he studied that. And the Avatamsaka Sutra, which last time we talked about, Master Wisang imported to Korea the great school of Korean Buddhism called Hwaom Buddhism, which is a great cosmological understanding kind of philosophy of Buddhism, very important in the history of Korean Buddhism. Later, Jajang didn't really bring this to Korea quite so, he didn't really establish the school, he just learned the philosophy, brought it back, he lectured on this philosophy, but didn't really establish it. It was one generation later, Master Wisang really established this Hwaom school in Korea. Jajang is most famous for the Vinaya. We get here. Now, he was favored by the Emperor of China. He was a favorite guy, called to the palace to interview with the emperor, who really respected him and liked him. And when Jajang finally asked him for permission, said, "Can I go home to my country, Shilla?" And the emperor granted him permission, gave him great gifts, Buddhist altar pieces, Buddhist silken canopy to put over the Buddha statues, Buddhist sutras, which in those days were very rare, precious. It was difficult to copy by hand on early kind of Chinese paper, these long sutras and such. So it was rare to get a copy of one, very precious. He was given a whole small library of Buddhist scriptures to bring back to Korea. This was a symbol of the Emperor of China being favorable towards Shilla. And 30, 40 years later, China helped Shilla defeat the other two countries. They worked together militarily to unite the Korean peninsula. So Jajang is perhaps kind of the beginning of this thing of Tang Dynasty China making a good relation with Shilla kingdom in particular, and being against the other two kingdoms. And Jajang kind of beginning this, and later this has a big fruition 30 or 40 years later. Okay, 30. Now, Jajang comes back to Korea. He returns. And by now, King Jinping is dead, and we have Sundawang Yewang is now queen. Very famous, very famous. Out of all Korean history, the most powerful woman there ever was until Park Geun-hye, perhaps. The only comparison. Korea's only had a formal ruling queen 3 or 4 times in all of history. She's the first and really the most powerful, like Elizabeth I of England, the first Elizabeth, taking power, having no husband, not getting married, taking power as a woman, ruling as queen, and really being powerful. She continued what Jinping had going of really making Shilla a powerful country, military victories, stronger army, and organizing, centralizing the Buddhism, making the Buddhism as a real religion and having it support the government. And to do this, Jajang was her main man. Okay, this role has been played by different monks all through history in establishing new dynasties, new kingdoms, getting things going, and even under Park Chung-hee dictatorship in Korea, Master Cheongdam the Jogye order here, playing that kind of role of organizing Buddhism and lining it up to support the government, sort of thing. So Sundawang, a very powerful queen, great queen. She is venerated in many temples. Both of these portraits are from temples in Korea. There are many temples around Korea that have a shrine for her as the great Buddhist queen. And she's really the powerful woman figure of Korean history. And then from her, after her, there was another woman. She appointed another woman as her successor, interestingly, a woman a little bit younger, Queen Jinjang. And she's the one who formally made the alliance with China and then set up the unification of Korea. After that, Korea never had a strong, powerful woman, official woman leader for 1,300 years until Miss Park got elected here. That's the significance of today. Sundawang. So, he comes back in 643. Sundawang has already been in power for 7 years. At this point, Sundawang receives him with the highest honors, grand ceremony and such. You are the man. And she says to him, you help me make Korean Buddhism. You are qualified. You can do it to make Korean Buddhism as official in this country and organize it. Jinjang said, yes, I can do that. Thank you, Your Majesty. She gave him the money and the power to do all the things I'm going to say after this that Jinjang did. The queen was the one standing behind him, giving him the authority, the soldiers behind him, the government bureaucrats, the money, the gold that were necessary for this great construction, this traveling, this organization of Korean Buddhism. She stood behind him. And to use the holy relics that she highly honored him, that he had brought back relics of Buddha, authentic Sarya, brought this back to Gyeongju, presented it to the queen, and she was so happy. And she said, okay, you use this to make Korea the holy Buddhist land, according to your vision. She appointed him supreme Buddhist overseer. That's one way to translate. It's what got called Guksa by the end of Shilla time or the very beginning of the Goryeo dynasty. Guksa meaning national master, national patriarch. Today the Jogye order has a supreme patriarch, a supreme national teacher. They also have a president of the Jogye order. This is kind of a combination. It means the top Buddhist monk. Jinjang was the first one. Maybe Huangyang had some kind of title like this. Huangyang, when he came back from China, he was given a lot of power by the royal authority and lived at the central temple, but we're not sure he really had an official title. Where Jinjang was given this title of top Buddhist monk. The one who must be obeyed. Okay, and authority to impose structure and discipline on all Shilla Buddhism. He established the first royal office of Buddhism, an office within the temple complex, and later headquartered at Huangyang, the imperial dragon temple right in the middle of Gyeongju City, at a government office to regulate Buddhism. So this had, power, the authority of the state for the first time behind an organized structure of Buddhism and such. So he founded what is called a school of Buddhism in Korea, the Yuljong, the Vinaya school. Again, the Vinaya, there's regulations of monks and temples, how you must live, how you must do. He established that. That was a separate school all the way from India. Since Emperor Ashoka in India, there's a school of monks who just study that. They spend their whole monastic career studying the rules and regulations for monks and temples and then interpreting them, and different case studies and such, interpreting, making decisions, and helping the government to regulate Buddhism as a religion. So this was a school from India. It had been established as a school in China, and Jinjang officially established that school here in Korea. That is no longer a separate school, really. It just goes along with all the Buddhist orders. But he made strict regulations for registering temples and practicing Buddhist monasticism, and exams for becoming and remaining a bhikkhuni. He mandated Chinese-style robes and headgear even, made the Korean Buddhists dress in the same kind of silk robes or cotton robes. They didn't have cotton still then, but hemp, whatever they were using, the same kind of robes as Chinese Buddhists wore, and kind of hats and things. He regulated it in every way. As I said before, anybody in Shilla could just say, hey, I'm a monk. And, well, I guess you are. And this is very important because monks don't do official labor. They don't really have a job, right? And in regulation, if you're a very high-class person, you have a government position, and if you're a low-class person, you have to work, you have to do farming, and the king would call, every time the king's going to do a construction project, and all the men, all the common people men have to come and be construction workers for 1 month for the king. You got no choice, drafted labor. But if you're a monk, you don't have to do those things. So you see, this always in every kind of society, they have to regulate who can be a religious figure because they don't work, they don't pay tax, they don't serve in the army. When there's an invasion, a battle, a big army, such monks don't become soldiers. In Europe, the same problem with Catholic priests. So you see, under this kind of way, every young man would want to be a Catholic priest, right? You can sit around and study and pray. You don't have to go to the army. You don't have to do construction work. You don't have to do the farm work. Good life. And so, same thing in Europe. They had strict regulations for who can be a priest and who everybody else is not a priest. No, you're not. You get to work, boy. And if you break the rules and regulations, if you're caught getting drunk, then they say, okay, you're not a priest. Take off that robe and go to work. See, this is very important. You have to do this for society, because if every young man says that he's a monk, and every house, I'm a temple, so I don't pay any tax, then of course society collapses, government collapses. So you have to regulate these things. There have to be rules of what is a temple and what is not a temple, because temples are tax-free. That's very important decision. So Jinjang regulated this. He set up the rules and standards, and he enforced them. He sent the government soldiers, would go to somebody's house and say, no, you're not a temple. You don't qualify. Either you get qualified or start paying tax, buddy. Okay, so this is very important. And rules for being a monk. He instituted exams, which is a very Chinese thing, very Confucianism sort of a thing. But China was already doing this. Exams to become a monk. You got to pass a test that you understand something about Buddhism, that you've actually studied. And he made it periodic exams. You had to take one exam every 2 years. You had to take the exam again every 2 years, a new exam. If you failed, you're out. So monks actually had to really study and really practice and to keep it going, to remain a monk. You had to stay a monk. Also rules and regulations like no drinking, no having sex, or no having improper sex, shall we say. Activities and no drinking and no eating meat on the temple ground. There are rules like this, rules. And if you broke the rule, they would say, okay, you're not a monk anymore. So this is really important. It organized Korean Buddhism, made it a legitimate religion. And of course, a religion that was supporting the government. That goes without saying. In support of the queen. Now, because he did all this, he's known as Jinjang Yilsa. Yilsa, this term means Vinaya master or precepts teacher. You could translate it as and such. He was the master of the Vinaya, the Yul, and he's the only Korean monk that has that title officially on his posthumous title. You know, posthumous meaning after death. They give you a sort of monastic title and such. And with something like Sunsa means meditation master, or Desa, great master, or Josa, the most honored one, meaning founding master. And Jinjang is the only one that I know of in Korean history. In Korean history, and still today, any monk who studies the Vinaya and really masters it and becomes like PhD level student of the Vinaya, he can be called a Yulsa. People call him that during his lifetime. You know, he's a master of the Vinaya. It's like having a PhD in Vinaya. But he's the only one who, as his actual official name, posthumous title, is Yulsa. He is the Yulsa of Korea, of Korean history, as far as I know. Now, he went and established a main theme of my lecture today, the Jokmul Bogung temples. Created 6 of them, apparently, 6 such shrines. This Jokmul, it means silent nirvana or sublime equanimity. This refers to the Buddha's enlightenment, the Buddha passing into nirvana, a totally silent nirvana, a final nirvana extinction from the early Buddhism, the Theravada Buddhism, the ultimate goal of that, and becomes later more of the Chinese, the East Asian Buddha, Mahayana style of supreme enlightenment, just say. It's an indication of that. And that's Jokmul, and then Bogung, meaning treasure palace, which is then, it's the highest level designation of a Buddhist hall, the highest possible designation. The other shrines in a Buddhist hall, palace, which is where the king lives, I mean an actual royal palace, or a hall, a Buddhist hall, a jun, like Daeungjung or Amita Jun and such. Those are the official halls of a Buddha, or a gak, which is a lower level shrine for the mountain spirit or bodhisattva spirits often, or the Nahan Buddhist disciples or whatever organized. Those are housed in a gak, that's lower level, and Jun is higher level, and then there's Bogung, treasure palace. It's the highest possible designation of a building. So together, the Jokmul Bogung means a shrine that contains Sarya, relics of Sakyamuni Buddha himself. It's supposed to be relics of the actual historical Buddha, supposedly. All right. Yeah. Okay. And especially holy sites of Korean Buddhism for like pilgrimage sites where people go to worship, and these sites are still today. 5 of them, the 5 that still exist out of the 6, these are primary sites where Korean Buddhists go to practice devotional worship practices. Okay, now, the origin of a Jokmul Bogung, the diamond throne stupa under the Bodhi tree. Again, the actual place where Buddha was enlightened is the original Jokmul Bogung of all Buddhism. And the concept spread of just the most holy place that could be in any Buddhist country. So, he created 6 of these holy sites. The Sarya in each are enshrined in a stone pagoda or Buddha reliquary monument, these bell-shaped or irregular pagoda-shaped stone monuments that Korean Buddhists build to enshrine holy relics made of granite stone here in Korea. In 3 cases, and in an earthen mound, simply a tomb-like mound, just like a tomb. The relics are enshrined below there, and there's a stone lining, a stone covering, protecting it, and then earth, soil, and then grass grown on top of it. No trees permitted, but just grass growing over the mound, like a tomb, like we still see in Korea today, like the royal tombs. In 2 cases, we don't know why he did this variation, why there is this if he really did this. I mean, we don't know for sure. The records are so ancient and such. But in 5 cases, in 1 case was a different case that's special. We'll get to that in a minute. So the term Jokmul Bogung includes the shrine building, usually named that on its Pyeongak signboard. The signboard says Jokmul Bogung in Chinese characters, that offers a view of that reliquary in place of a statue or painting. Usually the Jokmul Bogung shrine building, like this, a Buddhist hall building, in the back of it there's no statue. It's the only kind of Buddhist hall that doesn't have a statue of Buddha in the back, any kind of Buddha or Bodhisattva. Instead, there's just a window. A window opens, and From that window, you can see outside the holy pagoda or mound where the relic of Buddha is. So you're kind of worshiping Buddha directly, not through a statue, but you're looking at his actual place of relics. That's what it means. And it can be applied to the entire temple. People say this whole temple then that contains one of these shrines, they say the whole temple is a Jokmil Bogung, or a Jokmil Bogung Sachal. Sachal means a temple of Jokmil Bogung, either way. All the 5 extant ones are at sacred and scenic mountains. They're at some of the greatest mountains of Korea. Really beautiful places. Jinjang had very good taste, as you're going to see here in a minute, of choosing sites. Place of really beautiful, great places. 2 are down in the valley, down low. 1 is mid-altitude, halfway up, and 2 are way up high, near the peak of the mountain. Again, we don't really know why this variation of the placement, but it's just the way that he felt like doing it, apparently, in each separate case. The vanished one, there's one, I'm talking about 5 here, the 5 that still exist today. There's one that does not exist. It was a central pillar of the 9-story pagoda of Huangyang Temple in the old center of Gyeongju City. When that great tower was destroyed by Mongol invaders, the Mongols, Genghis Khan, all this 1200s, this area was never recovered. We don't know what happened with that, although there are a few legend stories, but we don't know. This one that disappeared is now within a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Some of the others are proposed as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. They're on the list of proposal investigation, but the only one that is now in the Gyeongju Historic Area Site includes Huangyang Temple Site. This is it. This is what it looked like, we think. Well, we have some idea of Huangyang Temple, this giant 9-story pagoda, which Jinjang suggested to build that. This is something the dragon of Taihe Pond at Wu Taishan told him to build this 9-story pagoda. Already this temple existed. This temple existed since the 500s. 558, they say officially. It was supposed to be a palace, supposed to be a new palace, but by mysterious Buddhist events happening and the sighting of a yellow dragon on the grounds, then the king ordered, he said, no, don't make it a palace, let's build it as a temple. And it became the greatest temple of Shilla time. It no longer exists, but there's a huge building. These are gigantic, huge Buddhist halls here in the back, great galleries all around, big shrines and such. But the central courtyard was empty. And the dragon at Wu Taishan told Jinjang, he said, you build a 9-story tower there, the greatest tower in all of East Asia. He said, if you build that, then 9 other countries, 9 nations around Shilla, which would include Japan, the Manchurian barbarian states, and Siberia, and Goguryeo and Baekje Kingdom, of course, and the Gaya Kingdom down south, and possibly even China itself. 9 nations that surround Shilla will submit to Shilla, will recognize Shilla as the greatest nation. That never actually happened, but Shilla did become very powerful and conquer the whole Korean peninsula, at least did anyway. Built this. This was, we believe, this was the highest tower in East Asia for hundreds of years. The Chinese have no record of building anything taller than this. It was a full 81 meters, 9 stories, each story 9 meters high. A vast thing. Now, these kind of buildings were used as study centers and kind of library. This is where they keep the sutras, study the sutras, and translate them. This is what pagodas were used for in China. So far, China in the Tang Dynasty, they had only built like 4-story and then later 6-story pagoda buildings and such. And then later, by the end of Tang, they were building 8-story pagodas, but they didn't have a 9-story one, and not nearly this tall. This is the original skyscraper of East Asia and remained so. It was hundreds of years until China built something taller and such. Korea can do this for one reason. Korea can build things like this, and China and Japan can't, for a very simple or earthy reason: earthquakes. Earthquakes. Korea doesn't have earthquakes. Here, you know. China, Japan has terrible earthquakes. Anything they build, they have to build it very light and very danceable and not too tall, because anything they build could come right down on your head at any particular time. They have lots of big earthquakes. China, right on the other side of us, has plenty of earthquakes throughout China. Right near Beijing, right nearby Korea, near Beijing area, they had the deadliest earthquake in all of human history, the Taishan earthquake, right east of Beijing. They're close to Korea. Killed 200,000 people in just like 1 hour in 1976. So they both had big earthquakes, and their buildings, you got to prepare for this, and it limits what you could build in classical times with their kind of technology. No longer, but now. And Korea, though, no earthquake. We never have an earthquake stronger than about 4.0, except in very exceptional circumstances in history, possibly. But as far as we know, 4.0, not much. We're built on a solid bed of granite. There's no earthquake faults here. It's just solid granite, this whole peninsula. And therefore, Korea can build something like this, and it will not come tumbling down. This, in fact, stood there for 500 years until the Mongols got here and burned down this whole temple and looted it. And it has never been rebuilt. This is what remains of Huangyang. It's very sad and ghostly. Unfortunate. Out of these Jukmil-Bogung temples then, out of the 6, 2 are now in national parks, 2 are in provincial parks, 2 in local protected areas, and all have different monument styles, pagodas and mounds. None of them are really similar to each other, which is kind of funny, seeing as the same guy erected this, but the changes of history. If somebody what Jinjang first built, somebody later reconstructed it, we don't know. Certainly these things have been refurbished. These are along the Baekdu-daegan, several of them. Okay, along the Baekdu-daegan range, which is the very important mountain range of all of Korea. You can look at my website right here, baekdudaegan.com, about this line of mountains. Jinjang arranged 3 of his Jukmil-Bogung along this line right here, and the others in important places. He took a trip up north, apparently supposedly right after coming back to Korea and getting the royal authorization. He traveled up north to areas beyond Taebaeksan, north of Taebaeksan, where Shilla had just recently conquered, a few decades ago, had conquered these areas away from the Goguryeo kingdom, taken over, and he was really determined to make those holy Buddhist Shilla kingdom places. Traveled up there. These mountains, he gave these names. These are Buddhist names. These are important holy Buddhist mountains in India, which then the name is translated into Chinese characters in China, and China used some of those names for its mountains there and such. He gave those names in Chinese characters to these mountains, which are still really great mountains along the Baekdu-daegan range. The Diamond Mountains for the Diamond Sutra of Buddhism. Soraksan means essentially the Himalaya Mountains and Mount Everest, the main range of the Himalaya Mountains, the snowy mountains. That's what Soraksan means, one of our great national parks. Odaesan, that's Taishan, the 5 platform mountains. Dutashan refers to Duta, heaven, the heaven where, the Buddhist heaven where Maitreya, the future Buddha, is waiting to come to earth. His heaven, that's Duta and such. He gave these names, making these sacred holy Buddhist mountains by naming them. This is where they are here in South Korea. This is the white is the Baekdu-daegan line. The first one that he established is here at Yeongju at the Huangyang Temple, where he advised the queen to build this 9-story pagoda and gave the architecture plans. The first one. The second one right here at Odaesan. The third one up here at Soraksan. The fourth one over here, strangely, not at a great mountain called Sajasan, next to the Cheoksan National Park. Today, it's not in the park, but right next to the park. Cheoksan are great mountains. Right next to there, He built one of them way over here, which is kind of inland, curiously to the others. And then down here, a great temple, one of Korea's greatest temples. He established Jukmyo-bogung down here. And then finally, the last one before his death, right here, right by Taebaeksan, with a very holy, sacred mountain of Korean shamanism. All right. First of all, we go to Odaesan. Great mountains, the 5 platform mountains. He traveled to these mountains and discovered that they indeed had the configuration of five kind of rounded peaks. The highest peaks are kind of rounded, forested, not sharp, craggy peaks like Soraksan. Rounded peaks that look like a platform for a Buddha to sit. 5 peaks with a great valley in between. And he visited there and he confirmed that yes, this is the place we can find the Bodhisattva wisdom here in Korea. Today it's National Park. He founded this temple. Still today, one of the greatest temples in Korea, Woljongsa. It's one of the 31 headquarters temples of the Jogye order, governs all of eastern Gangwon-do province. And so supposedly, right in 643, he founded this Moon Vitality Temple. Still today. At this temple is one of Korea's greatest Buddhist treasures, this great Goryeo Dynasty pagoda and the kneeling bodhisattva figure in front of the pagoda. This was not built by Jinjang. It was built hundreds of years later at the beginning of the Goryeo Dynasty, but it's one of Korea's greatest Buddhist treasures that remains at that temple. Okay. Now, above that temple, way out, actually, you're talking about 9 kilometers up the valley, 9 kilometers from Woljongsa, way up the valley into remote forest on the highest peak, on this, about halfway up the highest peak of Odaesan, the Birobong. He built this shrine and established the Buddha Sarya there. Strange placement. That's why, remember, in these days, you go into a place like this, there's no civilization, there's no human beings probably even living in that whole valley, in these great forested mountains. There's tigers. There's lots of tigers. There's bears. I imagine Jinjang going there, I imagine he had a bunch of soldiers with him, frankly, royal soldiers probably, following him for protection and such. And then building construction way of miles, 20 miles from anything you could call civilization, and building a temple site. This was hard work and difficult and dangerous with the tigers, the bears, the black bears. This was their territory. Only the wildest shamans would have been out here in these mountains at all. But Jinjang came way up here and built this kind of place. This is the mound. This is behind this building, right behind it with a window back looking upon it. There's this simple stone monument and this mound. That's all there is. Below that at the bottom, so 7 kilometers from Woljongsa, later, after Jinjang, about 50 years later, 60 years later, 2 princes, son of the king of the next generation, came here. They were Buddhist devotees. They worshipped strongly and really discovered Moon Subbosal, Bodhisattva wisdom, discovered him there, and built this temple, Sangwonsa, which today is the overseer of that Jukmyo-bogung shrine above it. It takes about an hour to walk from Sangwonsa, or maybe 45 minutes to get up there from, and walking only, there's no road, and so to get up there. And it's a very famous Korean Buddhist temple with this very famous statue of Moon Subbosal, Bodhisattva, appearing as a child. Very famous, very holy place of Korean Buddhism. The next one he established is up here. Look at this. This is Soraksan National Park, nearby the highest peak up there, the Daechongbong, along the way, this configuration of giant rocky cliffs, and in the middle of it, he established a pagoda right there. And you see the people. He built the pagoda right on the side of this cliff in the middle of this, 1,300 meters high. Why did he do this? Imagine the effort, the difficulty in those days. There's no pathway in the mountain. You gotta cut your own way through the forest and find some way. How did he even find this place? in the middle of these remote mountains and with the tigers up there. God knows. But somehow he did, and established a pagoda and put Buddha Sarya. You must think in those days, you must think nobody will ever come here to visit this. This is so far, so high up, far from civilization, the tigers are out. Who is even going to come here to worship? I would have been thinking. But he had the mentality to do this up here. Another view, this is the hermitage that's now there, below that pagoda. The hermitage is there, Bongjongam, the Phoenix Nest Temple, one of our best holy sites. Another view then of the people worshiping and the pagoda and looking out over the very deep valley back there of Inner Sorak, utterly remote, far from anything. A great, fantastic holy site. The small, skinny pagoda, a little 5-story pagoda. Jajang put here and put the Buddha Sarya within the base of this pagoda. Supposedly contains the Sarya Buddha in there, and it makes the whole mountain then as a holy Buddhist site. Next one he came, this is the one that's inland in the near the Chiaksan National Park, Sajasan Bobhungsa. Now supposedly also in 643. So this is the traditional date of founding of these temples. That's what they say. It's a little hard to believe that in 1 year Jajang came back from China, established himself in the capital city of Gyeongju, and started the whole royal office of Buddhism and regulating Korean Buddhism, started doing that, and took a trip up north and founded 3 of these great temples in such remote areas within 1 year. A little hard to believe, but that's what the dates say. That's what is claimed by the records. I don't know. But he put this one here. Again, this is an earthen mound and this shrine building in front of it. Another view, this is the mound itself with the great Sajasan Mountains. That means Lion Mountains. Lion is the animal ridden by the Subbosal, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. That's his mount, the animal that he rides. You can see it depicted here. A dragonish lion called a Hete figure and such. So it's called the Lion Mountain. And this stupa pagoda sits in front, and the Sarya are buried in that tomb-like mound. And here's another view of the shrine building there. Now, the 5th one, we get to number 5, that he established in 646. This is 3 years later. That's a little more realistic. He goes down south, and this is now one of Korea's greatest, grandest Buddhist temples, designated as a national treasure of Korea. The Jukmil Bogung monument is the only one of those 5 that are a national treasure list. It's a capital of Korean Buddhism, one of the central temples, most important, and is proposed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. As a temple proposed. It will be in the future, I suppose. We're talking about here, right down here, south of the capital, Gyeongju, the only one that he made that's down there so far south. This area. He came to this mountain, found this great mountain with kind of a platform peak. He named it Vulture Peak. Yeongchui-san. This, in Buddha scriptures, this is where Buddha taught the Lotus Sutra, the Yunhwa-gyung, a very important sutra in all of Buddhism. This is the site, supposedly in the sutra, it says that Buddha sat on the Vulture Peak in the Himalaya mountain. It's a mountain in the Himalaya mountains of Nepal or India or Sikkim, some such place there. And that name traveled to China then in Chinese characters and becomes this in Korean, Yeongchui-san. He named the mountain that. This is the mountain where Buddha taught the Lotus Sutra. There he established this temple, Tongdosa. 646, the Crossing Over Monastery, one of the greatest temples in Korea. Technically, it's said to be the biggest temple in Korea. As far as number of buildings, number of monks, it can hold 18 hermitages around in the mountain around this temple, which is the highest number of hermitages of any temple. Palgongsan, Eunhaesa, and Haeinsa both have 16 hermitages. So they're number 2. And such. This has 18 hermitages around it, and one of them is named Jajang-am, for Master Jajang. Supposedly, he lived there during the construction of the temple, supposedly. Okay, but this great temple of Korean Buddhism. There, he established this. This is the greatest of Jajang's monuments, this simple Budo on a stone platform. Inside here are the relics of Sakyamuni Buddha, supposedly the most important ones. The piece of Buddha's skull and the piece of cloth of his robe and his fragment of wood of his begging bowl of the Buddha supposedly are inside here. I haven't never seen any photos or anything of when they reconstructed it, but that's what's supposedly inside here, along with possibly some of the Sarya crystals. We don't know for sure, but those are inside here and this main hall building behind them. Okay, this is what it looks like. The Jokmyo Bogung established. He built this whole altar as a square platform. See, this is much more elaborate than the other ones he built. He built this whole as an ordination platform. He built this and he declared, as part of his regulating of Korean Buddhism, he said, to be a Korean Buddhist monk, you must come here and take your vows, take the precepts, accept the monastic precepts where you vow to follow the rules and regulations of being a monk and commit yourself to monkhood. You must do it at this platform. He set that regulation. This is the place, the central capital place. You have to travel here and do your ceremony at this place. And all for the next 1400 years, it's been a main platform. It's no longer the only one used, but it's for a lot of Korean history, it's the main central one. There are other temples that have a few stone ordination platforms like this, but this is still the main one, and Korean monks consider it, even if it's not the first place they get their ordination, that at some point in their monastic career they have to attend the ceremony and do it here, or else you're not really a Korean monk if you don't, at least for the Jogye order. Now, other orders may, of course, practice differently, but this is the place established by Jajang. This is the famous main hall in front of it. This has been reconstructed many times. Of course, this one dates from the middle of the Joseon dynasty. Supposedly, Jajang designed the original hall in this way, which again, it's a square hall, notice square. It's not rectangular like the others, like usual, kind of a square shape. And inside, in the back, that there is a window. Originally, just an open space, no statue. And Jajang design, and the window looks right at the monument, right there. This is Jajang's design. This is very much followed, this kind of design is followed by other Jokmyo Bogung shrines around the nation today. This is the window. Now it's a glass window. They put in glass there, window looking at this. There's a stone lantern in between them to the gateway here, the gate, and then the monument itself. It's designed like that. Very famous. You might say one of the very holiest spots of Korean Buddhism, certainly. In the winter, very peaceful scene, etc. It's a major object of pilgrimage. Korean Buddhists of all kinds come here to bow and pray at this monument. Korea has this unique system, you may have heard, the Subbosal, temples of three treasures. You know the three treasures of Buddhism. We mentioned them in our opening ceremony here. We devoted ourselves to them, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. Korea has this unique system that no other country has. No other Buddhist country has this one particular temple for each one of those that really represents the value of this Buddhist treasure. And Tongdo-sab then becomes Temple of the Buddha. The one that has the Buddha's actual relics here in Korea, that's the Temple of Buddha and such. Haeinsa, which contains the Palmandaejangyung or Tripitaka Koreana scriptures, that's Temple of Dharma. And Songgwangsa, where the Jogye order was really founded. The Jogye order we know today in 1200 AD was founded, and that's Temple of the Sangha, the Buddhist community. Okay, so out of the three treasure temples, Jajang is responsible for starting this system with Tongdo-sa. Okay, one more time, we get back here to this map, and the fur and such, you just founded Tongdo-sa, these others up here. Now we come here, Taebaeksan, near the end of his life. Taebaeksan, very holy mountain of Korean shamanism. He founded this temple, Taebaeksan, Jongamsa, even though it's actually at a mountain, the next mountain over, called Hambeksan, which is actually taller than Taebeksan. It's 6 meters higher than Taebeksan. But still, nobody respects Hambeksan. Hambeksan is not considered a holy place. Taebeksan is the great, holy, sacred mountain. And so this temple names itself Taebeksan instead of Hambeksan. Jongamsa, temples all around that whole region within a 20-mile radius, they all do that. Within 20 kilometers, they call themselves a Taebeksan temple, even if they're at some other mountain. But if you're anywhere near Taebeksan, you call yourself Taebeksan temple because Taebeksan is so sacred, so holy to the Korean people. For shamanism, for Korean nationalism, not originally a Buddhist mountain at all, but Jinjang changed that. Okay, built this here. It's a beautiful mountain, a nice tourist place in Gyeongsang County. He built this, or at least somebody later built this. It's kind of hard to believe that Jinjang built this because it seems like a later kind of design. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-story pagoda in this case, and made out of kind of brickwork, cut stones cut to look like bricks. Very hard and difficult work. We're not sure that this was original from the 600s. It may have been done later, but the Buddhasarya are enshrined here. It's on top of a cliff above the temple here. This is the main temple building, their main hall here, and the pagoda's up here, you see. Okay. Now here he built this. This is up above the pagoda and down below it, right at its foot down here. It's impossible to get a picture of the two of them together. You can't, it's obscure. But this is the Jukmur Bogung Hall then, and in the back of it is a window. No Buddha statue, again, for worship at this point. And they also have a Jajanggak, a shrine dedicated to Jinjang as the founder, which some of the other temples also have a kind of Jinjang shrine. This is his official portrait that's in that shrine. Taebeksan, which is nearby here then, about 5 kilometers away from that Jongamsa temple, very holy sacred mountain of Korea, always been known, the Cheonjedan Peak. This peak, where it is believed, is associated with the myth of Dangun, the first king of the first Korean kingdom, the founder of Korea. Supposedly his father descended to earth at this point, and there's a great altar there and other famous shaman altars along the way. And look right here along this strip. This is 1,560 meters high, the 7th highest peak in all of Korea, and this temple that Jinjang founded here at 1,500 meters, possibly really the highest Buddhist temple in all of Korea, the highest altitude one, Manggyeongsa, right there, right below this very holy peak. This is the kind of thing, the shamanism, the nationalistic shamanism and Confucianism style ceremonies held at this great shrine on the peak. This temple is right below the peak, just a 10-minute walk or less below the peak. Okay, this contains a well spring. This thing, the Yongjung well. This is one of the origins of the Nakdong River, Korea's greatest, biggest, longest river, which runs all through the old Shilla Kingdom, the main river of the Shilla Kingdom. This is one of the places attributed that where it starts, way up here, 1,500 meters high, an amazing amount of water, actually. More than, it's about like 1 liter per second is gushing out of the pipe these days of this water, 1,500 meters high. It's amazing. And it's very clean, pure, granite filtered water and such. Inside here, I haven't got a good picture, but at this site, so it's a very holy shaman worshipping site, dragon worshipping site. Jinjang took this over according to a dream that he had that told him to come here by the Bodhisattva of wisdom, Subbosal. Dream he had to come to this place. He heard that a stone statue of Subbosal had appeared by the well, so he figured that was Munsu calling him, and so he came to this site and he founded this temple, which still it's a rather small, humble temple because it's so high up. It's a favorite temple of mountain hikers, but far from everything. Nearby, across from that great peak, is this peak, Munsubong Peak. Jinjang gave that name, Munsubong, the Bodhisattva Wisdom Peak, 15 meters, somewhat a little smaller but very dramatic with these giant shaman towers all over it. This is a Korean shaman, Mudang, worshipping at the shrine. It's a very powerful peak still today for shamanism. Shamans practice there and such, but it was named Munsubong by Jinjang and such. Buddhist monks. Jinjang said in the scripture, in the Samguk-Gyusa, there's a cryptic statement. He said he found the mother of Subbosal at this peak. The mother of the Bodhisattva is the mountain spirit, the Sanshin. Sanshin, Korean mountain spirit, very important in all Korean culture. That the mountain spirit of this peak is the mother of Subbosal. This is a radical doctrine because in Buddhism, in official Buddhism scripture, bodhisattvas don't have mothers. They don't have fathers. They're kind of deity. They're originally supposedly a human being, but there's no such thing as a god or spirit who is the mother or father of a bodhisattva. This is not Buddhism. It does not exist. But Jinjang said so. He's tying here indigenous Korean culture, the Korean cult of the mountain spirit of this mountain, Taishan, which is so strong, believed to be the most powerful mountain spirit, tying that into Buddhism. We're linking together, saying this mountain spirit is the mother of the bodhisattva itself. So he's really linking together Korean culture with the old. Now he passes away at this area. 658 is the official date, 1 decade before Shilla finally was unified. And just about the time he was dying is when Wonhyo Desa and Wisang Desa, these two were coming into full maturity as great masters, great geniuses, establishing the real true schools of Korean Buddhism. Just about the time he dies, the next generation is taking over and such. Living in retirement, had a dream of a spirit that he should meet at the Great Pine Tree Pavilion, Daesongjong. It's above Gangneung in Odaesan Mountains. He went there, met Subbosal, told him to meet again at Taishan, the several mountains to the south. He climbed Taishan and found a Galbanji snake and waited at Jongamsa Temple. Then a strange, shabby monk, a monk with very bad, dirty, raggy clothing, looking very poor and like nothing, comes to that temple and bluntly asks, using banmal, a blunt Korean language, asks, I want to see Jinjang. Let me see Jinjang. And the monk said, don't you know, he's the greatest master of the kingdom. How can you speak like that, you dirty old beggar monk? Who are you? How dare you speak like that? They reacted like this, and the monk reported to Jinjang, the assistant reported to Jinjang and just said, he's a crazy guy. And Jinjang said, well, make him go away. And such. So he walked away from the temple. He turned around and he said, oh, I guess you cannot recognize me, even you great master of Korean Buddhism. You don't know who I am. And he revealed himself to be Subbosal. And he was carrying, I didn't mention, he carried in his basket, he had a basket with a dead dog, a dead puppy dog sitting in the basket. Like, you're going to give this as an offering to Jinjang. And they refused him and kicked him out and such. So now he walked away from the temple. He turned over the basket, dumped the dead puppy on the ground. It became a lion, a magical lion, Hete, and he climbed on the back of it and rode away. And Jinjang and the monks, they realized, oh my God, we are so stupid. We didn't recognize. We should have been nice to this crazy old man. We should have treated him as an honored guest, because look, he turns out to be Subbosal. Okay, Jinjang then ran after him. There was a glowing light fading in the distance of the Bodhisattva riding away towards Taishan Mountain, going to the south. Jinjang ran after him, even though 68 years old man. He ran after him and chased him until the southern pass, and then Jinjang died from the running, I guess. His heart gave out. He died. He was cremated and enshrined in a cave. They said in a cave. I have never found this cave. I don't know where this cave is. It must be in that Taishan area, but I don't know. Now, his legacy. And I have 4 minutes left. And I'll try my best. Give me 10 minutes, okay? I'm going to try my best here. The Jukmil Bogung temples and in sacralizing Munsubong of Tebeksan mountain. By doing these things, granting Buddhist names of major mountains, establishing shrines, Jajang consecrated the mountains of Shilla. He made them holy Buddhist places. By doing so, he makes all of Korea eventually, as Shilla then unified Korea, Shilla became the whole Korean kingdom, it becomes a Buddhist holy land, equal to China and India. This is so important. This is why the Chinese established mountains in China, they said, were the home of the bodhisattvas, because to be equal to India. China's a great civilization. You know, the Chinese people are very proud of themselves, very proud. They could not accept, they accepted Buddhism as a religion, but they could not accept that only India was a holy land. India is the land of the Buddha, and that's where everything holy and sacred is. China's just nothing. China could not accept that. They had to establish that bodhisattvas lived in China, and therefore China is kind of equal to the Buddha land. Now, Jajang is doing the same thing for Korea. That Korea would not be considered psychologically, could not be considered inferior to China or to India. That Korea is itself fairly equally, roughly equally, a Buddhist holy land in itself. This is all what Jajang was doing and what he accomplished. After him, there was the self-confidence, the pride in Korea that this is a holy land. And this leads later to Huangyang Temple saying, I don't need to go to a foreign country to study Buddhism. The truth of Buddha is right here, and I can find enlightenment right here in this country. This is as good as any other place. So it is very, very important that he established this. Now, to review again, he appointed Supreme Buddhist Overseer, authority for discipline of Buddhism, established a royal office, registration of monks and temples, did all that. He founded the Yiljiang Vinaya School and became the only Yilsa. Really, then, he's the founder of the Korean Sangha, the Korean Sangha, the community of Buddhist monks and Buddhist believers, those who maintain the temples, we might just say the general Buddhist community. Jajang can be considered really the founder of the Buddhist Sangha, and as such a high honorary position. And he advised the building of the 71 meters pagoda at Huangyang, made it his headquarters. Again, just for review, these are his 6 Jukmil Bogung temples, 5 of which still exist and are major pilgrimage sites. Now, the continuing tradition, beyond those 6, these other temples now claim to be Jukmil Bogung temples, and more than this, but these are the most important ones that I have discovered. These temples now claim, through various different historical stories, they claim that somebody brought the Buddha Sarya from India and they got it and put it in their temple and have a Jukmil Bogung shrine. Probably the most important one is the first Moaksan Gumsansa, the most important temple that claims that. But these other temples also claim in various ways through various stories that they have this. And the list keeps growing. I keep finding new ones that claim this because you get more visitors, you get more donations, whatever, if you claim this. And one is right here in downtown Seoul, Jogesa Temple, that 10-story pagoda that a monk from Sri Lanka in the year 1911 brought the Buddha Sarya here to Korea and donated it to the Korean Buddhists and such, and they built that pagoda. So right here in downtown Seoul, there is a Jukmil Bogung monument. All right. Now, 34 temples claim that Jajang founded them. They make that claim. Most of, I'm sorry, with no real historical record to prove it, perhaps, but 34 temples claim that, including the whole cluster right at Soraksan. So it makes it a very holy Buddhist mountain. Supposedly, Jajang made all of these. The Bongjangam is the Jukmil Bogung, but all these other temples, which are very important temples today, and tourists visited. These are some of the most visited temples in Korea because 3.5 million people every year come to this national park to see this. This is one of them. One of the others, we have here Taewasan Magoksa, a very important temple, a very major temple of Korean Buddhism, one of the top 30 temples, certainly